Sometimes a woman doesn't know her own strength until the people she trusts the most force her to find it. I was 29, living in a small apartment in Charlotte, North Carolina. The kind of place where the walls were thin, the floors always creaked, and nothing felt permanent. I used to joke with my husband, Mark, that the apartment felt like a starter life. But now, looking back, I realize I was the only one trying to build anything real. The night it all started, he said something that hit me harder than any contraction ever could. "Stop being dramatic, Emily. It's not always about you." He said it while grabbing his keys, barely looking at me, as if my swollen belly and aching back were just background noise. I was due in 3 weeks, but my body had been tightening all day, like someone was twisting invisible ropes through my stomach. I told him I didn't feel right. He rolled his eyes. "You're fine. I'm heading out. Don't call me unless it's an actual emergency." The door slammed before I could respond. I remember staring at that door, the chipped paint, the loose handle, thinking how much of my life I had shoved behind it, hidden just to keep the peace. An hour later, the pain got sharper. Not unbearable, just deep. "Low," repeated. I grabbed my phone, paced the living room, tried to breathe. The lamp in the corner flickered like it always did, throwing shadows across the carpet. I counted the seconds between the squeezes. 5 minutes apart. My hands started shaking. I sat on the couch and whispered to myself, "Please, not tonight. Not while I'm alone." I called Mark. No answer. I texted him. "I think I'm in early labor. Please come home." Nothing. I tried again. Called. Texted. Called again. My calls went straight to voicemail, the same automated voice that suddenly felt like an enemy. "This wireless customer is unavailable." I kept remembering the last week, how he'd been working late, showering as soon as he got home, turning his phone upside down on the table. I pushed those thoughts away. I didn't want to believe the obvious. Not tonight. Not when I needed him. But contractions don't care about what you want. By midnight, they were 4 minutes apart. I could barely stand without gripping the kitchen counter. My breath came out in short bursts. I called him again, tears blurring the screen. Still nothing. That was the moment something inside me cracked. Not just fear. Not just pain. But a realization, a cold, quiet one, that I wasn't a priority to the man I had built a life with. I sat on the kitchen floor, back against the cabinets, phone in my hand. I didn't even remember pressing the wrong name in my contacts, but I must have, because instead of texting Mark again, I accidentally sent my message to someone else. "Please, I'm having contractions. I need help." And in less than 30 seconds, my phone lit up with a reply from a name I hadn't spoken to in almost a year. "Emily, where are you?" "I'm coming." My breath caught. My heart flipped. It was not my husband. It was someone who should never have needed to step into this moment. Someone who, without knowing it, was about to expose the truth I had been avoiding for months. I didn't know then that my entire life was about to split open, the same way my contractions were splitting me from the inside. But I did know one thing. Mark's silence was not an accident. It was a choice. I stared at the screen, at his name glowing back at me like a ghost from a different life. Jason, my ex-coworker, my friend before Mark drove him away. The man Mark always insisted had boundaries issues, even though he was the only person who ever truly asked me how I was doing. My fingers trembled as I typed back. "I'm home. Please just hurry." I didn't know what scared me more, the contractions tightening in my lower back, or the fact that the one person rushing to help me wasn't my husband. Another wave hit. I gripped the side of the counter, trying not to panic. The clock above the stove blinked 12:17 a.m. The apartment was silent except for my uneven breathing and the buzz of the refrigerator. I called Mark again anyway. Voicemail. I whispered, "Why aren't you picking up? Why now?" But saying it out loud only made the truth feel heavier. By 12:23, headlights flashed across my living room window. Then a knock, firm, quick, urgent. "Emily, it's me. Open the door." I pulled myself up and unlocked it. When I saw him standing there, hair messy, wearing a sweatshirt thrown on in a rush, something in me broke. Not from love. From relief. From finally not being invisible. He stepped in, eyes scanning me. "You're contracting? How far apart?" 3, maybe 4 minutes. My voice shook. "I've been trying to call Mark." Jason's jaw tightened. Not in judgment. In anger on my behalf. "Okay," he said, steady. "We're going to the hospital. Can you walk? Do you have your bag?" I nodded toward the hallway. "It's by the door." He grabbed it without question, like he had always known where things were. Another contraction hit, sharp and deep. I leaned into the wall, breathing hard. Jason was instantly there, one hand on my back, grounding me. "You're okay," he said quietly. "You're not alone." That sentence. God, I hadn't heard anything that gentle in months. We made it to his car. The night air was cold, and the parking lot lights buzzed overhead. As he helped me in, my phone vibrated. Not from Mark. From a number I didn't recognize. But the message? It told me exactly why he wasn't answering. "He's here. Thought you should know." A picture followed. Blurry. Low light. Two people sitting too close in a bar booth. One was Mark. The other a woman I'd never seen. My stomach twisted, and it wasn't the contraction. Jason glanced at the screen, then looked at me. "Emily, are you sure you want me to take you to the hospital, or do you need 1 minute to breathe first?" His voice was calm. But my world wasn't. Because in that moment, I realized the man I was about to have a child with was cheating on me on the night I went into labor. I don't remember answering him. I just remember staring at that picture, Mark leaning in, smiling at someone else while I sat alone in our apartment, timing contractions and begging him to come home. It wasn't shock. It wasn't confusion. It was clarity, cold and painful, but clear. I pressed my hand against my belly and whispered, "It's okay. I've got you." Because in that moment, I realized I couldn't depend on anyone except myself, and the tiny life inside me who deserved better than this chaos. Jason slid behind the wheel, but didn't start the car yet. "You don't have to look at that again," he said, gently taking my phone from my hand and placing it face down in the cup holder. I nodded, but my throat felt tight. He ignored every call, every text. "And this is why." Jason exhaled, long and slow. "I'm sorry, Em. You deserved better than this. You always have." A contraction cut through me before I could respond. I gripped the door handle, breathing through it like the nurse had taught me at my last prenatal visit. When it passed, Jason finally pulled out of the parking lot. The streets were quiet, empty, and washed in orange light from the old street lamps. I watched the buildings blur past, my mind racing. The hospital wasn't far, 10 minutes, maybe less, but every minute felt like another reminder of how badly I had misjudged the man I married. "I don't understand," I whispered. "Why would he leave me alone like that? Why wouldn't he just tell me?" Jason didn't let me finish. "Because he's a coward," he said plainly. "He's been checked out for a long time. You just didn't want to see it." I felt tears burn behind my eyes. He wasn't wrong. He wasn't cruel. Just honest. And somehow, honesty hurt less than lies. When we pulled into the hospital lot, I felt another contraction coming, stronger, deeper. Jason parked and rushed to my side before I could even open the door. "Lean on me," he said. Under the bright hospital lights, everything felt too real. My breathing, my fear, my disappointment, the truth. Inside, a nurse rushed over with a wheelchair. "Contractions. 3 minutes," Jason answered for me. She nodded and started pushing me toward triage. Jason walked beside us, his hand briefly touching my shoulder. Steady, warm, grounding. But as I was wheeled into the exam room, something shifted inside me. Not just physically, emotionally. I wasn't just hurt now. I was done. Done excusing him. Done waiting for him. Done being small so he could feel big. And I knew, when the time came, I would confront him. Not with anger. With truth. Because he needed to see exactly what he walked away from. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and bleach, sharp and cold. I sat on the edge of the hospital bed, legs shaking, gripping the thin blanket wrapped around my shoulders. Jason stayed by my side, holding my hand through each wave of pain, but I barely noticed the contractions anymore. My mind was elsewhere, spinning, replaying every lie, every late night, every excuse Mark had ever given. A nurse entered with a clipboard. "Name, date of birth, and who is your emergency contact?" I gave the information automatically, my eyes fixed on the floor tiles, counting the seconds between contractions. Then came the question I wasn't expecting. "Are you alone tonight?" I nodded, voice barely above a whisper. "My husband, he couldn't come." The nurse frowned slightly, a hint of sympathy in her eyes. "You're doing the right thing by calling someone else. It happens more than you think." I wanted to laugh. Not at her, but at the absurdity of it all. "More than you think." "Really?" Jason squeezed my hand. "You're not alone anymore. I've got you." And in that moment, I realized something I had buried for too long. I didn't need him, Mark, to validate me. I didn't need his presence, his approval, or even his love to survive. My body, my mind, my life. I could protect it myself. I had to. The contractions intensified, sharper and closer together. I leaned back against the hospital bed, breathing deeply, repeating the mantra I'd whispered to myself since the night began. I am stronger than this. I am stronger than him. After what felt like hours, though it was only minutes, the nurse checked me again. You're progressing fast, she said, smiling. I'll call the doctor. Jason adjusted the blanket around my shoulders, brushing a strand of hair from my face. See, you've got this. You've always had it. I wanted to scream, not from pain, but from anger. Anger at Mark, anger at the betrayal, anger at how much I had ignored my own instincts for the sake of a man who didn't deserve me. As I waited, I thought back to the last time I had fully trusted him. The last time I felt safe letting him in, not just into the apartment, but into my heart. Every promise, every late-night conversation, every laugh we shared, tainted now by his betrayal. And yet, in this sterile, bright room, surrounded by strangers who cared more in 10 minutes than he had in months, I felt clarity. I was going to rise. Not just through labor. Not just through pain. Through him. Through his lies. I would confront the truth. I would reclaim my life. And I would never allow anyone, especially him, to make me feel invisible again. The doctor arrived, and with a nod from the nurse, preparations began. I gritted my teeth and straightened my spine. This was more than childbirth. This was my turning point. Jason whispered once, leaning close. You're about to prove just how unstoppable you are. I nodded, gripping his hand, but this time, it wasn't just for support. It was a promise to myself. And deep down, I knew that by the time this night ended, nothing would ever feel the same. The labor was brutal, each contraction demanding every ounce of my focus. But amid the pain, a strange sense of clarity settled over me. I wasn't just bringing a child into the world. I was reclaiming myself. Every breath, every scream, every tightening wave reminded me that I could endure, and that I wouldn't be broken by someone else's betrayal. Jason stayed by my side, never leaving my hand, his calm presence grounding me. Every time I felt like I might collapse, he whispered, "You've got this. You're stronger than you know." And I realized he was right, not because he believed in me, but because I had finally begun to believe in myself. Hours passed. The world outside the hospital room felt distant, irrelevant. My phone buzzed quietly in my bag, but I ignored it. Mark had sent texts, frantic, angry, apologetic, manipulative. I didn't read a single one. My focus was sharper than it had ever been. No excuses, no distractions, no lies could touch me now. Then, with one final, painful push, a tiny cry filled the room. My daughter. Her skin was soft, her eyes fluttering open like she was already searching for truth. I held her to my chest, tears streaming down my face, and realized something. This little life deserved honesty, strength, and dignity. I would give her that. I would model the kind of courage I hadn't fully seen in myself, until tonight. Jason stepped back, giving me a moment alone, and I whispered to her, "You've got a fighter in your corner." And so do I. After the nurses cleaned and swaddled her, I finally picked up my phone. The texts from Mark were relentless. "I'm sorry. It's not what it looks like. Please forgive me." I scrolled past them without a second thought, my thumb hovering over the block button. And then I did something I hadn't had the courage to do in months. I called a lawyer I'd consulted earlier that week about our finances and separation. I explained calmly and clearly everything: his neglect, his betrayal, and the need to protect my daughter and myself. The lawyer listened, asked questions, and assured me that we would take every step necessary. I felt a sense of power I hadn't known since I signed the lease on our apartment. Only this time, it wasn't tentative. It was absolute. Later, alone in the hospital room, I looked in the mirror. My face was flushed from labor, but my eyes were sharp, unyielding. I saw a woman who had been abandoned, betrayed, and humiliated, and who had refused to let those experiences define her. I saw someone capable of protecting herself and her child. Someone who would fight back, not out of revenge, but out of justice. Mark's world no longer mattered. What mattered was truth and dignity, and the life I held in my arms. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled, not a timid, hopeful smile, but a strong, unshakable one. Because I had survived betrayal. I had endured pain. And now I was free to rise. By the time I got home from the hospital, the sun was just beginning to rise, painting my small Charlotte apartment in soft gold. My daughter slept peacefully in her bassinet, her her tiny chest rising and falling with the rhythm of life I had fought so hard to protect. I sat beside her, coffee in hand, and let the silence wrap around me. It was a quiet, unassuming kind of peace, but it felt earned. I thought about Mark. About his calls I never answered, his texts I never read, the photo that had exposed him for who he truly was. I could feel anger bubbling up, but I didn't let it take over. This wasn't about revenge. This was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, my choices. I pulled out my laptop and started documenting everything: dates, messages, bank records, and screenshots. I made a list of shared assets, things that belonged solely to me, and things that required legal attention. It was methodical, deliberate. Each keystroke reminded me that I had control, that his lies and betrayals couldn't touch what I had worked for, or the life I was building for my daughter. Later, my lawyer called to confirm our strategy. We would separate assets, ensure custody arrangements were fair, and protect me from any further deception. My heart beat faster with each step, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was anticipation. The anticipation of being free from a relationship that had left me feeling invisible, unworthy, and alone. And yet, part of me ached. Not for him, not even for the betrayal, but for the time I had given, years of patience, compromise, and hope that had been met with betrayal instead of partnership. I let myself feel it, and then I let it go. That evening, I watched my daughter sleep, her tiny fingers curling around mine. I whispered to her softly, "You'll never have to doubt your worth. I promise." And in that quiet room, I felt the full weight of what I had survived. It wasn't just labor. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a reckoning. I had faced fear, humiliation, and abandonment, and I had emerged stronger. The next day, I confronted Mark. He stood in the doorway, awkward, unsure, the photo still fresh in his mind. He tried to apologize, to explain, to negotiate forgiveness I wasn't ready to give. But I looked at him and said calmly, firmly, "I don't need your apology. I need the truth. And I need my life back." He faltered. His excuses stumbled over themselves. But I stayed strong, my voice unwavering. He realized, finally, that I was no longer the woman who waited, who excused, who shrank to fit someone else's comfort. And when he left, I closed the door behind him and felt a sense of liberation I hadn't known in years. For the first time, I felt what it truly meant to be free. Free from fear, free from betrayal, free to stand tall for myself and my child. And as I watched the sunset from my apartment window, I smiled softly for me. The weeks that followed were a blur of diapers, midnight feedings, and lawyer appointments. But they were also a time of rebuilding, not just my home, but my sense of self. Every small victory mattered. Every phone call resolved, every legal form signed, every honest conversation I had with friends or family. It was a stitch in the new fabric of my life. Mark tried to push back once. He sent a message demanding I reconsider joint custody, citing concerns he had about my parenting. I stared at the screen for a long moment, my daughter sleeping beside me. Then I typed one sentence. "I will do what's best for our child. That does not include being manipulated by your lies." End of discussion. I hit send and felt a weight lift from my chest. I wasn't shrinking. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't apologizing for taking control of my life. Friends noticed the change. One evening, my best friend sat with me in the living room, sipping tea, and said quietly, "Emily, I've never seen you like this. Calm, strong, unshakable. You've become untouchable." I smiled, but inside I knew it wasn't magic. It was blood, sweat, and tears. It was enduring betrayal and refusing to let it define me. It was realizing that my strength had always been there. I just hadn't been asked to use it, until now. Then came the day of the final hearing. I walked into the courtroom with my daughter in a stroller, her blanket neatly tucked around her. Mark was there too, looking disheveled, the woman from that night absent but implied. He glanced at me, expecting perhaps guilt, remorse, or hesitation. But he found none. The judge reviewed our files, the lawyer presented the facts. I answered questions calmly, directly. I didn't cry, I didn't flinch, I didn't excuse him. I spoke for myself and for my daughter. And when it was over, the ruling was clear. Custody and protection firmly in my hands, shared assets divided fairly, no loopholes left. I walked out of the courthouse with Jason waiting, giving me a supportive smile. I didn't need anyone to hold me up anymore. But having someone who truly respected me reminded me that kindness exists in the world. Back at my apartment, I closed the door behind me, my daughter in my arms. The city hummed outside, indifferent, unaware of the small but fierce victory that had taken place inside these walls. I laid her in her crib and sat down by the window, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee, thinking about how far I had come. I thought about the night of betrayal, the hospital room, the endless calls, the legal battles. I had been abandoned, humiliated, and ignored. Yet here I was, standing, whole, stronger than I ever imagined. And I realized something profound. Strength isn't about never being hurt. It's about standing tall after the hurt, claiming your life, and refusing to let anyone steal your dignity. I looked at my daughter sleeping peacefully and whispered, "We did it. We're free." The apartment was quiet that night. My daughter slept in her bassinet, the soft rise and fall of her chest the only sound in the room. I sank into the couch, exhausted in every sense, physically, emotionally, spiritually. The past few weeks had been a storm, but now, at last, there was a calm I had earned with my own 2 hands. I thought about Mark, about how easily he had abandoned me when I needed him most. How his silence had cut deeper than any argument, any betrayal, any insult could have. But I didn't feel bitterness anymore. Not the sharp, suffocating kind. Instead, I felt clarity. I had survived. I had protected my child. I had reclaimed my dignity. I went to the bedroom mirror, tired eyes staring back at me. My face was pale, shadows under my eyes, but my posture was firm. There was a line in my expression I hadn't seen before, a quiet, undeniable strength. A woman who had been broken and humiliated, and had chosen to rise, fight, and win. I remembered the opening night, the contractions alone, the accidental text that exposed the truth. I remembered Jason's steady hands, the hospital lights, the first cry of my daughter, the courthouse, the final confrontation. And I realized, every moment of pain had led me here. Every betrayal had taught me the weight of my own power. I held my daughter close, feeling her warmth, her heartbeat against mine. "We're going to be okay," I whispered, and meant it more than anything I had ever said in my life. I was no longer the woman who waited for him. I was no longer the woman who questioned her worth because of someone else's choices. I was me, and I was enough. The city lights blinked softly through the window, indifferent to my story, yet somehow comforting. In their quiet constancy, I saw the truth. Life goes on, with or without those who fail to honor it. And the people who truly belong in your world will stand by you when it matters most. I took a deep breath, resting my forehead against my daughter's soft hair, and thought about how far I had come. The night that began with betrayal had ended in victory. Not flashy, not loud, but deep, unshakable. I was free, whole, stronger than I ever imagined. Sometimes you have to lose everything to realize how strong you really are. And tonight, I finally understood what that strength felt like. I whispered to the quiet apartment, to the baby in my arms, to the woman I had become. We survived. We are enough. And we will keep rising. If you were in my place, what would you have done? Write it in the comments.